I returned home from my business trip just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the driveway. I had always loved the way the light danced on the cobblestones, turning the path to our villa into something almost magical. But tonight, something was different. My heart clenched as I pulled up to the iron gates. Two sleek, unfamiliar luxury cars were parked side by side where David's Range Rover used to be. My hand hovered over the remote control, but when I clicked, nothing happened. No familiar whir of metal shifting. The gates stood stubbornly still. I stepped out of my car, heels crunching on the gravel, and approached the keypad. I punched in the code, our anniversary date, a relic from when things were simpler. The screen flashed red. Denied. I tried again, slower this time, steadying my breath. Denied. A chill crept up my spine as I peered through the wrought iron bars. The lights inside the villa were blazing, spilling warm golden light onto the lawn. Shadows flitted behind the curtains, laughing, dancing. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers numb with shock as I dialed David's number. It rang twice, then went straight to voicemail. I swallowed the lump in my throat and tried again. No answer. Something was terribly wrong. I walked around the perimeter, heels digging into the soft earth, hands grazing the stone wall for support. It felt like a dream. Disconnected. Surreal. At the back garden, I found the French doors flung open, curtains billowing with the evening breeze. Champagne flutes clinked, laughter spilled out like acid. There they were. David, his arm draped, around a woman half his age, her blonde hair cascading over her shoulders like spun gold. She was laughing, tipping her glass back while he whispered something in her ear. My breath caught in my throat, frozen in disbelief. David's eyes flickered up, catching my reflection in the glass before he turned fully to face me. He didn't flinch, didn't scramble. He merely smiled, lifting his glass in a mock toast. My body moved before my mind caught up. I was at the door, hands shaking as I pushed it open. "What the hell is going on, David?" I demanded, my voice cracking under the weight of shock. He glanced around as if mildly inconvenienced by my presence. "Sarah," he began, voice dripping with condescension. "Didn't expect you back so soon." My eyes darted around the room. Our room. The place I had painstakingly decorated. The mahogany shelves that held our wedding photos were empty. The paintings I'd chosen with such care were gone, replaced with modern, sterile art. The space felt alien, gutted of everything that once made it ours. "What is this?" I whispered, voice shaking. "Why is she here? Why is everything different?" He chuckled, setting his glass down with a soft clink. "Oh, that," he said, as if I had asked about the weather. "I sold it." My mind blanked. "What?" "I sold the villa, Sarah. My name was on the deed. I had every right." I stumbled back a step, clutching the doorframe for support. You can't sell this place without me. We bought it together. This is our home." His lover stepped forward then, slipping her arm through his. She smiled sweetly, as if watching an amusing skit. "Not anymore," she chimed, her voice dripping with saccharine pity. David just shrugged. "You were gone. I did what I had to do. It's mine now." His words clanged against my skull like church bells. Mine. His. As if I were just another piece of furniture left behind. Just another relic of his past life, easily discarded. My mind spun. How could this have happened? I had always been so careful, always checked the papers, the accounts. Panic clawed at my throat. I turned, ready to run, to where I had no idea. But then I stopped, my breath catching. The trust. My father had insisted on it before he passed. "Always protect yourself," he'd said, handing me the thick envelope. "Even from the ones you love." The memory hit me like a jolt of electricity. The trust gave me full ownership of the villa. His name was only on the deed for appearance, a formality, a shield from liability. But the villa was mine. David was still laughing behind me, oblivious to the realization that unfurled inside me like a sail catching wind. I straightened, my fingers releasing the tight grip on the door frame. I could feel my heart rate slow, my breath steady. "Goodbye, David," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. His laughter cut short. "I'll be seeing you soon." I turned on my heel, leaving the echoes of his confusion behind me, and walked back into the night with my head held high, determination flaring like fire in my veins. The game wasn't over. It had just begun. I remember the first time I met David with such clarity that it almost feels like a photograph, frozen in time, untouched by everything that came after. It was at a charity gala, a lavish affair dripping with crystal chandeliers and champagne flutes that seemed to sparkle with every whispered secret. He was wearing a charcoal suit that fit him like it was stitched by the hands of fate itself, his hair swept back in perfect waves, his smile easy and disarming. I had been standing by the balcony, my fingers wrapped around the stem of a glass of Pinot Noir, when he appeared beside me, leaning against the railing with the confidence of someone who always got what he wanted. "Not much for crowds, are you?" he'd asked, his voice smooth, almost melodic. I laughed then, a genuine laugh that I would later realize had become so rare. "Not really," I replied, turning to face him. "And you?" He smiled, the kind of smile that stretched wide and genuine. "I prefer a good conversation over small talk any day," he said. And just like that, we spent the rest of the evening talking about everything and nothing. His ambitions, his plans for real estate investments, how he wanted to build something lasting. His dreams mirrored mine. A life of stability, of building something beautiful and enduring. When he asked for my number at the end of the night, I didn't hesitate. Our relationship bloomed quickly after that, a whirlwind of romantic weekends and late-night conversations that spilled into dawn. David was charming, attentive, and fiercely ambitious. He had this way of making me feel like I was the center of his universe. He'd bring me flowers every Friday, always lilies, my favorite. I remember placing them in the same crystal vase on the dining room table, their petals stretching toward the sunlight, delicate and perfect. We got married a year later in an intimate ceremony by the coast, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting everything in shades of orange and gold. He kissed me under the archway of roses, and I remember thinking that I had found it, the life I had always dreamed of. We were unstoppable. Together we started buying properties, flipping them, reinvesting. I was his partner, his confidant, the one he turned to with every idea and every setback. But as our portfolio grew, something else did too. David's ambition, once inspiring, became insatiable. He started working late, attending meetings I wasn't invited to, making decisions without me. I brushed it off at first. Business was demanding, and I trusted him. But trust, I learned, was a fragile thing. My father saw it before I did. He was always a cautious man, a planner by nature. "Always protect yourself, Sarah," he would say, eyes heavy with the kind of wisdom that only age and experience can grant. I remember the day he handed me a thick envelope, the corners worn from his handling. "Put the villa in a trust," he urged. "You never know what the future holds." I laughed it off then. Dad, David would never. His eyes softened, but his voice was firm. "Do it for me," he said. "Humor an old man." So I did. I filled out the papers, filed them away, and forgot about them. It was just a precaution, I had convinced myself. A silly formality to ease my father's mind. David barely glanced at the paperwork, signing it without reading a single line. I remember his laugh as he scribbled his signature. "Always so careful," he teased, ruffling my hair. But as the years went on, that carelessness grew. David's ambition twisted into arrogance, his affection morphing into cold indifference. I became a fixture of his life, an ornament, polished and placed in the perfect spot. Our conversations shifted from dreams and goals to surface-level discussions about dinner plans and client meetings. My career? It vanished into the background, a casualty of long nights and networking dinners that required my attendance but not my input. I became the wife, the one who smiled at charity galas, who decorated the villa for Christmas, who sent out the cards and planned the parties. I was the hostess, the silent partner, the woman beside the man with the gleaming smile. The lilies stopped coming. Friends hinted at things I didn't want to hear, whispers of late nights and meetings that lasted longer than they should have. But I ignored it, convinced that every marriage had its challenges, that we were just going through a rough patch. I had given up so much for him, my career, my time, my identity. I couldn't let it be for nothing. But deep down, the feeling grew. That gnawing, suffocating feeling that I was disappearing, slipping away from who I once was. My friends noticed. They'd ask me if I was happy, and I'd plaster on a smile and insist I was. After all, I had the villa, the cars, the life that I always wanted, didn't I? But it wasn't mine. Not really. I was living in David's world, under David's rules, dancing to a rhythm I hadn't chosen. I had become nothing more than a symbol, a role, the wife. And I hadn't even seen it happening. The villa felt different as I stepped back inside, hollow, like it had exhaled the last of its warmth and closed its doors to me. The walls seemed taller, more imposing, stripped of the familiar touches I had spent years perfecting. My heels echoed off the marble floors, a sharp staccato that punctuated the silence. David's laughter rang out from the dining room, muffled by distance but unmistakably callous. I moved quietly, the instinct to listen overpowering my sense of pride. His voice, low and smug, drifted through the half-open door. "Can you believe it?" He chuckled. "I sold it. The whole damn thing. She's too wrapped up in her little business trips to even notice." There was a pause, a soft giggle that wasn't mine, sharp and sugary. "And she doesn't suspect a thing?" A woman's voice asked, her tone dripping with amusement. "Not a clue," David replied. "The funds are going straight into the new venture. It's a gold mine, sweetheart, and soon this place will be just a memory. I'll make sure of it." My breath caught in my throat, jagged and painful. My hand trembled as I gripped the banister for support. It wasn't just an affair. It was betrayal on every level. He hadn't just stolen my heart. He'd stolen my life, my home, my sanctuary. Stumbled back, clutching my chest as if the air itself had turned to glass. My knees buckled, and I sank down onto the bottom step, the world blurring around me. I should have screamed, thrown open that door, torn through his lies with the sharp edge of truth, but I didn't. Instead, I stood shakily and walked to the master bedroom. Our bedroom. My bedroom now, I reminded myself. I took a deep breath and pulled the suitcase from the top of the closet, its leather sides smooth and untouched since our last trip to the Amalfi Coast. I unzipped it slowly, methodically, and began to pack. I folded my clothes with a kind of detached reverence, each sweater, each blouse, a relic of a life that had been dismantled brick by brick while I smiled through dinner parties and charity galas. His suits were still hanging in the closet, pressed and pristine. I resisted the urge to rip them down, to shred the fabric to ribbons and scatter them across the floor like fallen leaves. Instead, I reached for the top shelf, fingers brushing the dust that had settled there. My hands closed around a familiar leather binder, thick and weighty. My father's voice echoed in my ears, steady and firm. Always protect yourself, Sarah, even from the ones you love. My hands shook as I flipped through the trust papers, each page a beacon of hope that burned away the fog of disbelief. There it was, in ink and seal, my name alone. Owner, Sarah Evelyn Matthews. Not David, never David. A laugh escaped me, brittle and sharp, echoing through the room. He thought he owned me. He thought he owned my home, my life, my heart. But he didn't. Not anymore. I threw the suitcase into the trunk and climbed behind. The wheel, my hands gripping the leather steering wheel with a strength I didn't know I possessed. I left the villa without a backward glance. If I had looked back, I might have shattered, might have crumbled into the dust and memory of what I once believed to be real. I drove with white-knuckled determination to Lily's house. She lived, on the outskirts of town, where the streets were lined with willows that draped over the pavement like whispers. Her lights were on, a warm glow spilling from the windows onto the damp lawn. I parked haphazardly in the driveway and stumbled to the front door. Lily opened it before I could knock, her eyes widening with alarm. "Sarah, what happened?" Her voice was gentle, like the kind of softness reserved for broken things. I couldn't speak. I just collapsed into her arms, the weight of it finally pulling me under. I told her everything between gasping breaths. How I came home to strangers, how he had sold the villa, how he laughed with her like I was nothing, more than a memory. She listened, her arms tight around me, murmuring soft reassurances that didn't quite reach my ears. But when I mentioned the trust, something in her eyes sparked. She pulled back, gripping my shoulders with surprising strength. "You still own it," she whispered fiercely. "Sarah, you still own it. He can't sell what isn't his." The truth of it settled in my bones like iron. I reached into my purse, pulling out the leather binder, the trust papers creased but intact. "I need to see my lawyer," I whispered. Lily's nod was firm. "And I'm coming with you." The next morning, I walked into my lawyer's office with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. The walls were lined with thick tomes, the air thick with the scent of polished wood and faint traces of leather. Mr. Gardner greeted me with a warm smile, though his brows knitted with concern at the sight of me. We sat across from one another, the binder laid out between us. I told him everything, the words spilling out like poison, each one more acrid than the last. He listened intently, nodding along as I recounted the events of the past few days. When I finished, his eyes shone with something like pride. "Sarah," he began, his voice steady and reassuring, "this sale is completely invalid. The villa is in your name alone. It always has been." The breath I'd been holding released in a rush, my shoulders sagging under the weight of relief. "So, what now?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Gardner leaned back, his fingers steepled together. "Now?" He smiled, slow and confident. "Now we take back what's yours." For the first time since the betrayal, I felt the fire rekindle in my heart. The kind of fire that doesn't just burn, it purifies. David thought he had taken everything, but he didn't know me. Not really. I left the office that day with my head held high, the trust papers clutched tightly in my hand. This wasn't just about getting back what was mine. It was about taking back everything I had lost. My dignity, my strength, my sense of self. David had tried to erase me. Now, I was going to make sure he never forgot my name. The days blurred together in slow, aching waves after that visit to my lawyer. I stayed at Lily's, my suitcase still half-packed in the corner of her spare room, mocking me with its incompleteness. I had left my life behind in fragments, dresses still hanging in the closet, shoes lined neatly by the door, wedding photos smiling back from the mantel. But I couldn't go back. Not yet. Lily was my anchor in the storm. She'd hand me coffee, in the morning without asking questions, her silence a balm that soothed the rawness in my chest. Some nights, she'd pour us glasses of Merlot, and we'd sit on her porch swing, wrapped in blankets, watching the stars blink lazily above us. It was during one of those evenings, when the world felt distant and hushed, that I made my decision. Going to fight back, I murmured, my voice barely more than a whisper. Lily turned to me, her eyes sharp and bright with something like hope. What are you thinking? I took a sip of wine, the liquid burning its way down my throat. I need to know everything. His finances, his new business ventures. I want to see it all. Her smile was slow, spreading like dawn over the horizon. Then let's get to work. The next morning, I slipped into my old life like a second skin. I called old friends, business partners of David's, people I had entertained at dinner parties, and smiled at across ballroom floors. It was amazing how quickly they opened up with the right touch of nostalgia and the slightest edge of curiosity. I spent hours in coffee shops, tapping away on my laptop, scouring through business records, scrolling through social media profiles that boasted of new ventures and lavish weekends abroad. It was all there, David and his lover, flaunting money that I knew didn't belong to them. I saw it in the designer handbags, the private flights, the glittering parties she hosted in my home. But it wasn't enough. I needed more. I called in a favor from an old acquaintance of ours, James, who had worked with David in the early days of our real estate investments. He agreed to meet me for lunch, his eyes wary but curious as he slid into the booth across from me. Sarah, he greeted me, voice low and smooth. It's been a long time. It has, I replied, forcing a smile. I poured us both coffee, the scent filling the space between us with warmth. How's business? He chuckled, shaking his head. Better than David's from what I hear. My fingers tightened around the handle of my cup. Oh? I said, feigning casual interest. James leaned back, stretching his arms along the booth. Haven't you heard? The man's practically drowning. New business ventures that aren't paying off. He's stretching himself thin. And now with that new girl, it's a wonder he's still afloat. My heart hammered in my chest, but I kept my expression neutral. I guess I haven't kept up with the gossip, I replied, sipping my coffee. James raised an eyebrow. Well, from what I hear, his little affair is draining him dry. Not just emotionally, financially too. He leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper. Word is, he's selling off assets just to keep her happy. It's not going to end well. I forced a smile, my mind spinning with possibility. I guess some people never change, I murmured. We finished our lunch with polite conversation, but my mind was a flurry of calculations and plans. I drove back to Lily's with the windows down, the wind whipping through my hair, clearing the fog of disbelief that had settled there. The next week, I began to visit the villa when I knew David wouldn't be home. I waited until the luxury cars were gone from the driveway, slipping through the side gate with the spare key I had always kept hidden beneath the flower pot near the back steps. The first time I stepped inside, the air smelled different, cinnamon and vanilla, a scent I never used. The furniture had been rearranged, my photos replaced with gaudy decorations and portraits of her. Her. She had even redecorated the sitting room, replacing my soft blue curtains with garish red drapes that screamed for attention. I wandered through, the house like a ghost, my fingers grazing the new countertops, the glossy new cabinets that I hadn't chosen. Everything was different. Everything was hers. but it was mine. I pulled out my phone and began taking photos, capturing every inch of it. The renovations, the decor, the changes that were made without my consent. My heart ached with each snap of the camera, but I pushed through, cataloging. The evidence that would serve me later. I didn't cry. I wouldn't give him or her the satisfaction. That night, I sat on Lily's porch with a blanket around my shoulders and a glass of wine in my hand. The stars were sharper than usual, twinkling with a kind of sharp clarity that I hadn't noticed before. Lily joined me, folding herself into the chair beside mine. "You okay?" she asked, her voice gentle. I nodded, though the words stuck in my throat. I didn't realize how much I gave up for him," I whispered. "I sacrificed everything. My career, my friends, my identity. I just disappeared." She squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with empathy. "But you're finding yourself again," she said firmly. "Piece by piece." I looked down at the glass in my hand, the crimson liquid catching the light. I saw my reflection in its surface, tired but resolute. For the first time in years, I recognized the woman staring back at me. I wasn't gone. I was still here, and I was coming back. I took a deep breath, watching the stars flicker in the distance. "I'm going to get it all back," I murmured, the words laced with quiet determination. "Everything he took from me, I'm going to get it back." And as I said it, I believed it. The days that followed my revelation were unlike any I'd known before. I woke each morning with a sharpness of purpose, a clear-headedness that I hadn't felt in years. I had been broken down, humiliated, cast aside, but not destroyed. Lily watched with curiosity as I transformed her kitchen table into my command center. Documents were spread out like blueprints, highlighting loopholes and clauses I'd forgotten I'd signed. My father's insistence to protect myself had been a lifeline I hadn't known I would need. "Are you really going to go through with this?" Lily asked one evening as I clicked away on my laptop, sending yet another discreet email. I glanced up at her, my eyes clear and steady. "I already have," I replied, my voice firmer than it had been in months. David had flaunted his new wealth like a king parading through a conquered village. Social media was littered with photographs of luxury parties at my villa. Our villa, strangers lounging by the pool, glasses of champagne raised in mockery of everything I'd built. He was feeding off the illusion of wealth, and she, his little blonde companion, was soaking it up with glittering eyes and a smile that bordered on feral. What he didn't know, what he would never have the foresight to consider, was that I still held the strings. The lawyer had been explicit. The sale was void, but the legal process would take time to formalize. In the meantime, I had power, more than I ever knew. I started small, anonymously, of course. I reached out to a few old business contacts, ones David had carelessly disregarded or outright dismissed in his climb to the top. I asked gentle questions, planting seeds of doubt. "I heard he's taking on risky investments," I'd say, my voice dripping with concern. "You haven't noticed any irregularities, have you?" It didn't take long for the whispers to spread. People with money hate uncertainty, and I made sure there was plenty of it surrounding David. I spent my mornings like a woman possessed, clicking through his online profiles, gathering screenshots, evidence of reckless spending and extravagant trips that bled money like an open wound. His new lover posted constantly, clinking glasses on yachts, draped in silk and dripping in diamonds. His girl, she called herself, his world. I found it laughable that he'd let her parade his secrets for the world to see. All it took was a well-placed message here, an email there, and the doubt grew. Clients called off meetings. Partners pulled out of deals. One night, My phone buzzed violently against the kitchen counter, shaking with the force of a call that felt like destiny. I glanced at the screen, David's name flashing bright against the darkness. I let it ring twice, just long enough for the anticipation to build, then answered with a measured calm. "Hello?" His voice was raw, frayed at the edges. "Sarah," he spat, his tone harsh and brittle. "What the hell are you doing?" I leaned back against the counter, staring out the window at the moonlit trees swaying gently in the breeze. "I'm not sure what you mean," I replied, my voice smooth, controlled. "Don't play games," he snarled. "I know it's you. Ever since you left, things have been falling apart. They're pulling out of deals. Clients are walking away. What the hell did you do?" I held the silence for a beat, letting him stew in it. Then I replied, my voice softer, almost a whisper. "Sometimes," I said slowly, "actions have consequences." The line went dead. I didn't stop. I couldn't. It was like waking up after being locked in a dream, a nightmare of pretty lies and controlled smiles. I started going out again, attending gallery openings and networking events I had long since abandoned. My hair was shorter now, a sharp bob that framed my face with newfound confidence. I wore colors I'd forgotten I loved: emerald greens, deep plums, shades that brought out the fire in my eyes. I found old friends, ones I'd let slip away over the years as David's social circle grew and mine shrank. They welcomed me back, with open arms, some with sympathy, others with admiration. "You look stronger," one of them told me over cocktails. I just smiled and sipped my drink, letting the ice clink against the glass. I found work again too, consulting on real estate projects, using the knowledge I had honed during all those years as David's silent partner. It was ironic, really. He had dismissed my contributions for so long, treating me like a pretty ornament to stand beside him. He hadn't realized that I had been watching, learning, calculating. I was good at it, better than I remembered. And with each project I took, and I felt the chains loosen, I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. Weeks passed. I watched with muted satisfaction as David's little empire began to tremble. His calls came less frequently, replaced instead with angry voicemails and clipped messages. I never responded. He had made his bed. I was simply pulling the covers back. My lawyer called with updates, letting me know the final steps were being processed. The villa would be mine again soon, completely, legally, irrevocably. I found myself driving past it sometimes, slowing, as I passed the gates, my eyes flickering over the gardens I used to tend. She had planted new flowers, peonies and daffodils, garish and bright, as if screaming for attention. It didn't matter. I'd rip them out when I returned. And I would. Return. David thought I was beaten. He thought I was erased, a relic of his past life. But I was still here, stronger than he ever imagined. He had taken everything from me, my love, my trust, my sense of self. But I had taken something too. I had taken back my power. The morning was heavy with mist as I pulled up to the villa, the wrought iron gates looming before me like blackened sentinels. I stepped out of the car, the soft crunch of gravel beneath my heels echoing with every step. My lawyer, Mr. Gardner, emerged from his own car, briefcase in hand, his expression steely and determined. Behind him, a police officer stood with his hands clasped calmly in front of him, the weight of authority palpable. I took a deep breath, the air cool and sharp in my lungs. This was it, the end of the line. The officer nodded at me, and together we walked up the stone path that led to the front door. My heart pounded with every step, but my hands were steady. I reached the door, hesitating for only a fraction of a second, before I raised my hand and knocked. The sound was hollow, reverberating through the house. There was silence, then the distinct click of heels against marble. The door swung open, to reveal her. She was dressed in something silky and impractical, her blonde hair draped over one shoulder, eyes rimmed with surprise. Her gaze flitted from me to the officer, then to Mr. Gardner, who held up the stack of legal documents with a firm hand. "Good morning," he began smoothly. "We're here to execute the transfer of property, effective immediately." Her eyes narrowed. "Excuse me? Could you call David, please?" I asked, my voice steady and calm. Her mouth tightened, but she stepped back, her heels clicking sharply as she retreated into the depths of my home. I crossed the threshold, the familiar scent of lavender and something more expensive lingering in the air. Perfume, not mine. I walked slowly, letting my fingers graze the walls that had once held photographs of my life. Now they were bare, replaced, with abstract art that screamed of superficial wealth. It was like someone had wiped my existence clean, painting over it with broad, careless strokes. But I was here now, and I wasn't leaving. David stormed down the staircase moments later, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, eyes flashing with disbelief and anger. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, voice sharp enough to cut glass. I held my ground, my eyes meeting his without flinching. "It's over, David," I replied, my voice unyielding. "The sale was invalid. The villa is mine. It always was." He laughed, a short, brittle sound. "You're joking." Mr. Gardner stepped forward then, handing him the paperwork with a kind of reverence that only comes with absolute power. "The documents are in order," he said evenly. "The property remains in Sarah's name. You've been occupying it illegally for the past few months." David's eyes skimmed the papers, his expression shifting from disbelief to something darker. "You think you can just waltz back in here and take everything?" he spat, tossing the papers onto the marble floor. "I built this. I made this what it is." I stepped forward, just a half step, but enough for him to feel it. "You used me," I said, softly. "You stole from me, and now you're going to leave." His eyes flared, fists clenching at his sides. "You won't get away with this," he growled. The officer stepped forward, voice calm but commanding. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to vacate the premises. You've been legally served. Please collect your belongings." For a moment, I thought he might fight. His eyes flickered with something wild, something desperate. But then, his lover emerged from the hallway, her heels clicking nervously as she glanced between us. "David," she whispered, her voice tinged with fear. He turned to her, the fire in his eyes dying to embers. "Pack your things," he snapped. "We're leaving." I watched as they moved through my home, shuffling hastily to gather whatever remnants of their life together remained. She tried to take the vase on the mantel, an heirloom from my mother. But I cleared my throat, and she quickly set it back down, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. When they reached the door, David stopped, turning back to face me. His eyes were rimmed with exhaustion, his mouth set in a thin line. "I gave you everything," he whispered, voice cracking. "I made you who you are." I met his gaze evenly, feeling the weight of years settle around us. "No, David," I replied quietly. "I made me who I am. You just tried to take it away." He blinked, as if the words were foreign, then turned and walked out the door without another word. His lover followed, the click of her heels fading away until silence enveloped the room. I stood there for a long moment, just breathing. The house was mine again, not just on paper, not just in theory, but in reality. The walls seemed to sigh with relief, the sunlight streaming through the windows like a benediction. I walked through each room, my fingertips grazing the walls, my footsteps light on the polished floors. I traced my hand over the banister where, I had once tied Christmas garlands, felt the cool marble of the fireplace where David had once proposed, back when promises meant something. Everything was different now. The paintings were gone, the furniture replaced, but beneath it all, the bones of my life remained. This house was more than just walls and ceilings. It was a part of me, a reflection of who I was before I let myself be erased. I made my way upstairs, into the bedroom that had once been mine. The curtains were different, gaudy and too bright, but the light still spilled in just the same, bathing everything in warmth. I stepped to the window, looking out over the garden where I once planted roses. They were gone now, replaced with flashy bursts of color that seemed out of place. I smiled to myself. That would change soon enough. 2 weeks later, I hosted a small gathering in the restored villa. Friends I had lost touch with, neighbors who had watched the drama unfold, even a few colleagues from my new consulting work. The house was mine again, not just physically, but spiritually. I had ripped out the garish decor, painted the walls, back to their soft ivory, planted new roses in the garden. As we raised our glasses in the living room, laughter spilling through the halls, I felt it. Home. I wasn't just surviving. I was living. I was thriving. Lily clinked her glass against mine, her eyes shining. "You did it," she whispered. I smiled, feeling the weight of the past lift away. "I did," I replied, my voice soft but resolute. "And I'm never going back." The house hummed with warmth, with life, with me. And for the first time, I didn't feel like just the wife. I felt like Sarah, whole, powerful, unbreakable.